Morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to another edition of Breaking News. Today is Wednesday, the 5th day of March, 2025. And as always, we have a number of very important stories to bring to you, which continue to confirm the biblical predictions about what will take place in our world at the end of this present age, culminating in the second coming of Jesus Christ and the many events it predicts that will precede it. Now, each day we're getting closer and closer to the resumption of fighting between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Hamas refuses to negotiate any further, and Israel has now set a deadline for them to come to the table. And as we suspected, the Egyptian plan for the future of Gaza is a non-starter as far as Israel is concerned. Remember, they met yesterday in Cairo, and the Arab League adopted their plan of the restoration of Gaza, but it's a complete non-starter for Israel, as we'll talk about. Now, on the Iranian front, there's some really interesting stories that are floating around that Trump may work with Putin in an attempt to halt Iran's nuclear adventurism. Now, this story is worrisome because we know that Iran has no desire whatsoever to halt its program and its goal to destroy the big Satan, the United States, and the little Satan, Israel. So we'll see what happens here. Now, in fact, the vice president of Iran, Zarif, who was the face of the nuclear deal, just resigned yesterday because of pressure from hardliners in Iran. Therefore, we can't imagine Iran agreeing to some type of deal that would halt their production of uranium, getting it to nuclear capabilities, weapons grade capabilities, and allow then inspectors to come and verify what they're doing. They've never done this. And so we can't see how that would happen yet. There's talk that this may occur. So we'll keep an eye on that. All right, but let's look at the headlines. First one, hostage deal talks have reached a deadlock. This is what could happen next. And this is from Ynet. Mediators have informed Israel that Hamas is refusing to show flexibility or engage in talks based on the framework proposed by the United States envoy to the region. While fighting in Gaza could resume as early as next week, officials in Jerusalem hope that a series of measures currently under consideration will ultimately push Hamas toward compromise. 4 days after the first phase of the hostage deal ended, negotiations for its continuation have reached a deadlock. Mediators informed Israel that Hamas is refusing to show flexibility or even discuss the framework proposed by U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff. Instead, Hamas insists on proceeding with the second phase of the deal and accuses Israel of violating the agreement. Again, this is no surprise. The goals of Hamas are to halt the fighting once and for all, to rid Gaza completely of the Israeli Defense Force, and to rebuild. And this is not going to happen. Now, here is the real heavy headline here, the real kicker, as it were. Headline number 2 from the Jewish News Service. Hamas has a few days to agree to an extended truce. If the terrorist group has not agreed to the U.S. bridging proposal by its next meeting, the Israeli Security Cabinet will convene and decide on the next steps, said a spokesman for the Israeli Premier Benjamin Netanyahu. All right, the Hamas terror group has only a few days to agree to this proposed extension. The cabinet will meet on Sunday and then decide what to do if there's been no movement there. And so this is where we're at right now. Jerusalem, as we've been told, is developing a plan to resume the war in the Gaza Strip in 4 to 6 weeks in a decisive campaign to wipe out Hamas. This is from the Washington Free Beacon. Reported this on Friday. We talked about it here, citing several current and former Israeli officials. This includes something like 50,000 soldiers that would be there, and just overwhelm Hamas, separate the population and give them meet their humanitarian needs, but again, starve and basically blockade Gaza with the areas where Hamas is in there. And so there'd be a ruthless ground campaign hitting in the heavy terrorist areas, and they will receive no humanitarian aid. The campaign is to commence with a heavy aerial assault, we're told, followed by the reduction of aid entering the strip. IDF divisions would simultaneously enter the strip to the north, center, and south, carving it into three parts. Now, it could be halted if Hamas's leadership agrees to free the hostages, or if it disarms and goes into exile, the report says. Now, let's remember, there are still 59 hostages being held by Hamas. Of these, 24 are believed to be alive. Only 24, 35, including 3 women, are believed to be deceased. 2 of the living hostages and 3 of the deceased are foreign nationals. Phase one went into effect on January 19th, you recall, formally expiring on midnight this last Saturday. Jerusalem subsequently announced it has suspended all humanitarian aid after Hamas has rejected U.S. envoy Witkoff's plan to extend the temporary ceasefire during the Ramadan and Passover period. And so basically, what we've got right now here is Israel saying, look, enough is enough. We have quotation after quotation. We don't need to get into it from lawmakers saying, uh, we've done all that we can. Hamas is not bending, not budging. We've got to rid them once and for all. And it's going to be ugly. It's going to be powerful, but they don't seem to have any choice here. Everything points to renewed fighting that will be much fiercer than anything we have previously seen. Again, this is an interesting article about this. You want to read it from the Jewish News Service, and it basically says Hamas has only a few days to agree to the extended truce. And that again, Sunday is the meeting of the Israeli Security Cabinet. And if nothing has happened, then it looks like the hammer will drop and it will be war again in Gaza. Now, headline number 3, we talked about this yesterday. The Arab Summit met yesterday in Cairo, and they adopted, as we thought, the Egyptian alternative to Trump's Gaza plan. The statement continues to rely, here's the problem, on the Palestinian Authority and UNRWA, both who have repeatedly demonstrated corruption and support for terrorism, from the Jerusalem Post. The adoption statement by the Arab states of the Egyptian reconstruction plan for Gaza is entrenched in perspectives that are no longer relevant post October 7th. This is what Israel's foreign ministry said yesterday, Tuesday. The statement came in reaction to the adoption of the plan during the Arab Summit, which convened in Cairo. According to the Egyptian plan, an administrative committee of independent professional Palestinian technocrats would govern Gaza temporarily in preparation for the Palestinian Authority's return to the Strip. The statement continues to rely on the Palestinian Authority and UNRWA. Both have repeatedly demonstrated corruption, said the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and they support terrorism, and they failed to resolve this. So this fails to resolve the issue. The ministry also said the statement issued bore no mention of Hamas nor the October 7th massacre. Then they said this, and here is the truism. For 77 years, the Arab states have used Palestinians as pawns against Israel, condemning them to eternal refugee status, the ministry continued. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump's plan for Gaza should be encouraged, according to Israel. Instead, the ministry noted, adding it would grant an opportunity for the Gazans to have free choice based upon their free will. Now, what's interesting, we had a meeting we talked about last week with David Tall, our Israeli friend, guide, who was a commander, tank commander in Israel. He's now, first time, he said, it's the first time in 40 years I'm watching a war on television, because he's retired. And then our friend Nader, who Iranian, who is deeply involved in all of this in various aspects. Nader said something interesting. He said, because his people are there. They're there in Gaza. They're there in, with Israel Defense Force. He says, you probably got a total of 5,000 people, and that's it, who want to remain in Gaza. The rest of them all want to leave. They don't want to stay there. They really don't. But they are not allowed to leave. If they were allowed to leave, you would see a mass exodus from Gaza. Of course, you got to find some place for them to go. But this should encourage this. But the Arab plan says, no, they got to all stay. And Gaza is rebuilt, and it'll be the same old all over again, what's been going on for 77 years since the founding of the State of Israel. This is a plan, like we say, has never worked. It will never be able to work, seeing that the Palestinian Authority, like Hamas, believes the Holy Land belongs to them and them alone, and their goal is to rid every Jew and every Israeli out of the territory. That's what Mahmoud Abbas has said. In the new Palestinian state there, which will cover all of the Holy Land, there won't be one Jew living there. Israel, of course, cannot buy into something like that. So that's kind of the place where we're at right now. What's going to happen the day after, which is a whole nother issue, after Hamas is removed from Gaza. Now, these next two headlines are really sort of disconcerting here, but we wanted to bring them to you to talk about what's been mentioned in the news. Headline number 4, a new nuclear deal. Trump turns to Putin for help on Iran. Russia has agreed to assist U.S. President Donald Trump's administration in establishing communication channels with Iran regarding nuclear issues. This is from Bloomberg. They reported this regarding nuclear issues and its regional proxies. The request came directly from Trump to Russian President Putin during a February phone call, according to sources familiar with the situation. White House officials have not responded to Bloomberg's request for comment on the matter. Reported discussions took place at high-level meetings between the U.S. and Russia officials in Saudi Arabia following the leaders' February 12th phone conversation, according to Bloomberg. Bloomberg also was told by the Kremlin spokesperson that Russia believes that the United States and Iran should solve all problems through negotiations, and that Moscow is ready to do everything in its power to achieve this. Neither Russia nor Iran have publicly confirmed or denied the request, according to Bloomberg. When asked about a potential Russian mediation, Iranian Foreign Minister spokesman Baghaei said this in a Monday press conference: it was natural for countries to offer assistance. Given the significance of these matters, it's possible that many parties will show goodwill and readiness to help with the various problems, again reported by Bloomberg. Now, this outreach comes approximately 6 weeks into Trump's second administration, during which he has worked to restore relations with Russia that were severed when Moscow's 2022 invasion of Ukraine took place. Both nations appear interested in cooperating on various geopolitical interests, including Arctic resources and trade routes. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov reportedly discussed Washington's interest in Moscow's assistance with Iranian issues during a February 18th meeting in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Lavrov later shared details about the meeting with the Iranian foreign minister during his talks in Iran. Now, the Trump administration has basically, according to this article, and it's true, has presented conflicting approaches towards Iran since returning to the White House. While pledging to reinstate maximum pressure policies from his first term, including sanctions against Iran's security forces, Trump at the same time has expressed interest in immediately working towards a verified nuclear peace agreement with Iran. The problem is the supreme leaders we've talked about, Khamenei, has publicly stated that Trump can't be trusted after he withdrew from the Obama-era nuclear deal during his first term. And he says there's no basis for us to talk to America. The new president, Pezeshkian, is basically toothless. He has to follow what the supreme leader, Khamenei, says, so he's fallen in line with that. And so we'll see what happens. Iran, as the article says, remains engaged in ongoing conflicts with Israel, having vowed to continue its support and its regional allies, despite Israel's military campaigns against Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, which are totally funded and supported by Iran. So here's the thing: it's difficult, if not impossible, to see how any real compromise can be reached, just like with Hamas, because you deal with organizations, and it's hard for Western minds to understand this, that have a goal in mind, and that is the destruction of the state of Israel. This is their ultimate goal. And back with Iran, it's according to their last days theology in Shia Islam, the destruction of the big Satan, the United States of America, too. And that's why they're working on the perfection of, nuclear weapons and the delivery systems that can bring them a short way to Israel, relatively speaking, than the ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, that can go all the way to the United States. And so, we don't see this happening, but interesting they're even talking about it. This is, again, rather odd, and we'll see what comes about it. Now, headline number 5 supports what we just said about how this not seemingly to be able to work. The Iranian Vice President Zarif, he was the former face of the nuclear deal, if you remember that back a few years. He quits now under hardliner pressure. He was a senior official who led talks with the Western powers a decade ago. He tendered his resignation to Pezeshkian for the second time in the latest blow to the reformist leader. Why did he do it? Because of pressure from hardliners in the Iranian parliament. There was a development that happened on Sunday. They impeached the finance minister who once ran for the presidency, and he said he'd be willing to talk to the U.S. directly. Well, saying that got him impeached and out of the parliament. And so it's the same thing. Zarif has the same attitude there. And the hardliners say no talking to the U.S. So that's why we can't see how this previous story could ever come about, where Russia could get in some way and convince the supreme leader to deal with the U.S. and to have some type of verified nuclear deal where the people, the inspectors, could go there and see if Iran is keeping with the agreement. The verification never happened during the previous years. They would not allow the inspectors in. They would hide things. They would move them. And so again, it's a really interesting situation. So it's really hard to see any other outcome with Iran than an attack on the nuclear facilities, but only time will tell. So what we have here, again, like we talked about yesterday, in these two big stories, the push, the movement more and more towards fighting in Gaza again, renewed fighting, which the world will scream about Israel and blame Israel for all of this. And then with Iran trying to find some type of diplomatic solution, which really seems impossible, knowing the mindset of Iran, because they believe, and we've talked about this before, they believe they're divinely inspired by Allah to do this, to destroy the big Satan and the little Satan. And so, really, it's nothing that you can say or do that can change their mind. All right, well, we'll see how this all pans out. I'm Don Stewart again. Thanks for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.